Okay, and with that, I think we are live and on the air, live and on the internet. It's great to be with everyone out there today. I see we've already got a handful of people joining on. Thank you so much for being with us on this Monday, Monday afternoon here on the East Coast, but I suspect a number of you are watching around the country or perhaps around the globe. So it's great to be with you in whatever time zone you're in or wherever. I see Jan's already checking in from Orlando, Florida. Good to be with you, Jan. Thanks for joining us today. Um, my name is John Lustrea. I'm the education coordinator at the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. And I'm joined today by Michael Mahr. He's been an intern with us, and he's going into his senior year at Gettysburg College this coming school year, which is right around the corner, actually. And his time with us is coming to an end, or at least his time as an intern is coming to an end. You can still have a chance to meet Michael if you come visit the museum on the right weekend. He's going to continue to staff the desk going forward on intermittent weekends. So if you really enjoy what Mike has to say here today, fear not, this won't be your last chance to ever cross paths with him. So he will be sticking around with us in the long run. So we're going to talk with Mike today a little bit about his time at the museum, what he learned, both about working at a museum and about some of the history, some of the research he did for us, and everything in between. So thanks for being with us, Mike, even though I told you had to be here. So welcome.
It's great to be here, John.
And I see we got Robert now checking in from Springfield, Illinois. So we got Florida and Illinois represented here. I'm originally from Illinois myself. Michael is originally from Massachusetts. Is that right, Mike?
Yep, born and raised just outside of Boston.
There we go. So if you're from that neck of the woods, let us know in the comments. Before we get started, just want to say, a couple quick things, of course. Thank you for tuning in. Number one, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure you go ahead and do that and hit like on this video. And that way you get notified anytime we do another live stream or post any other videos and things like that. We have got all kinds of exciting things coming up in the pipeline. So that's one of the best ways to stay connected with the museum is to subscribe to us on YouTube and like our videos and things of that nature. If you want to take that support to another level, you can sign up to become a member of the museum for as low as $25 a year. Your membership dollars go to support programming like this and allow us to continue doing what we do. So we really appreciate it, and we'll post the link to membership in the comments if that's something that interests you. So we're grateful for you all tuning in and for all the support we've already gotten from all of our viewers. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get into our conversation here today. If you all have any questions for Mike, go ahead and put them in the comments, and we'll make sure that he gets asked those questions. So to get us started, Mike, if you wouldn't mind maybe telling us a bit about yourself, how you came to study history, and what that process was all like for you, and what interests you about history and museum work, and all of that.
Well, I started really liking history when I was a little bit younger than I am now, with watching history documentaries. Most of them were World War II at the time. And I didn't really start getting into the Civil War until I started thinking about going to Gettysburg College around my junior year of high school. Gettysburg was my first official college visit and first step on campus, and I absolutely fell in love with the place. I knew I was going to apply there. And when I first got to Gettysburg, I didn't know much about anything Civil War related. I I really only knew some of the major dates, but none of the more nuanced parts of the Civil War, like some of the causes, why some of the soldiers decided to join the Union or the Confederate armies. I didn't really start getting into that until probably this past year, starting this previous fall, when I started living at the Civil War house on campus. I was surrounded by people who I go to all the time when I need advice, or I have a question about the Civil War that I don't know. And being around them made me want to learn even more and kind of become my own expert in the Civil War. And it was that same semester that I took a class on public history with Professor Jill Titus, uh, where I stumbled upon the Brian C. Bohanka internship program. And I applied for it because it is a requirement for my public history minor. And I also thought it'd be a really cool idea to get some hands-on experience with a Civil War site. And I'm going to be honest, my first choice was Vicksburg. I hadn't really studied too much of any of really any battles west or south of probably Appomattox. So my Civil War knowledge was fairly limited to the Mid-Atlantic, as I assume most people their Civil War knowledge usually is. But it was when I was going through the internship application process. Sadly, I did not get the Vicksburg job. So Titus sent me some information saying that Chickamauga and Chattanooga were interested in having an intern. By the time I submitted my application, resumes, and all that, the position had already been filled, in which case she then sent me in the direction of the museum right here. And I gotta say, I am very happy now that I'm coming to the end of my time as an intern here at the museum, that I didn't get Vicksburg, because I have had so many wonderful opportunities here, really studying a field that I don't think I really would have gotten into had I not gotten the job here at the museum. Because Civil War medicine, I definitely thought all the misconceptions were true about Civil War medicine. There wasn't, again, as much nuance as I thought to it. But then working here, I've been blown away by how little I knew about Civil War medicine. And as my time is, I am blown away again at just how much I've learned in such a short amount of time.
Well, I've never asked you that before, Michael, and I didn't know it was quite as circuitous of a route that you got to us. I'm glad that you're glad that you ended up with us, and we certainly are glad you came to us. Yeah, that's on the one hand, certainly very exciting. I mean, I love that you're kind of taking advantage of your college experience to, figure out, what you want to do, exploring the world. You weren't even aware that, this public history angle was an option. And you came across and you said that's cool. I want to get into that, and here we are. You're out here doing it, in the real world. So that's really neat. And then the other thing that I think is kind of interesting in your story there is, I think people have an assumption that everyone that works at a museum not only loves their topic, loves the topic of the museum, but is an expert in it. And I'm not trying to suggest that we're sending you out there not knowing anything, but there's a number of folks that work here at the museum that maybe if they were to choose a a dream topic to study and write about, maybe Civil War history wouldn't be their number one option. I mean, everyone here is plenty knowledgeable about the Civil War, but the main point is that, at various museums, you never know what the interests of some of the staff members are, and that definitely fits with your story as well, Michael. Now let's see. You've been doing a lot of walking tours through us for us during your time here. Our traditional One Vast Hospital walking tour. We talk about the Frederick Civil War era hospitals, most of which popped up after the Battle of Antietam. But we also do special first Saturday walking tours here at the museum, and the first Saturday in August is coming up later this week, and you developed a tour that you're going to be doing this first Saturday. You want to tell people about that tour, maybe give them a sneak peek?
Yeah, so it's called Just Passing Through, a Traveler's Guide to Civil War Frederick. And I'll be going to various sites around downtown Frederick, kind of walking the same paths as both Union and Confederate soldiers would do while they were staying in Frederick. And I'll be using the writings and accounts of Oliver Wendell Holmes, Surgeon C.E. Goldsborough, George Snowden, and Sergeant Henry Tisdale of the 35th Massachusetts. And I'll be making an attempt to revitalize 1860s Frederick through the retelling of the different sights, sounds, tastes, and smells. What these soldiers and people saw back in 1860s Frederick.
Yeah, and we get obviously a lot of tourists coming through Frederick today, but if you think about it, the Civil War, I mean, they were there to do other things, but the Civil War soldiers had, many of them had never been to Frederick before, so in some ways they were among Frederick's first tourists. So trying to, just like you said, Michael, trying to paint a picture of what Civil War Frederick might have looked like to the eyes of people who are just passing through, as many people do today, and we're always happy to welcome people that are just passing through. And so anyway, if you're in the area or you're going to be traveling, I would highly recommend going on Michael's tour. You can sign up online through our website. I'll post a link in the comments so you can take a look at that. Now, pivoting to your work here at the museum, Michael, why don't you tell the folks, what all you did while you were here at the museum, and maybe if there was something that was particularly enjoyable that jumped out at you, that part of your experience that you enjoyed.
All right. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that I've been over the past have been writing various blogs, posts for the museum's blog. I started out writing on typhoid fever. John thought it would be a good idea for me to get familiarized with Civil War medicine by starting with a very common disease of the Civil War. And we ended up deciding on typhoid fever. And I have a little bit of a statistic right here about typhoid fever, the Civil War. Among the Union Army, there were about 75,000 documented cases of typhoid fever, with 27,058 deaths, about a 36% mortality rate. While an exact number is not known, it's believed to be a similar rate among Confederate soldiers and African American soldiers. And that is just one of the many tidbits of knowledge that I found about typhoid fever in my research. It's elaborated more, and there's more extensive work done in my blog, which you can find on the museum's website. And that kind of takes me into my second blog post, which was just posted on our website earlier today on Gettysburg College and its role during the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, back in 1863, it was a one building college um, with less than 150 students attending the college. Especially in 1863, the number was just over 100. Most of the students had either elected not to return to campus during the course of the Civil War or ended up joining regiments from their hometowns. Um, but the building itself was originally used as a Union field hospital uh, up until the end of the first day of battle when the Confederate Army came through and controlled most of the town.
And that building still stands today. Isn't that right, Michael?
Yes, yeah, the building still stands today. One of the many traditions that Gettysburg College does is the Pennsylvania Hall walkthroughs. Uh, when first year students are coming onto the campus for the opening convocation ceremony, they will walk up the steps of Penn Hall, through the doors, and down the back set of stairs. And then for graduation during commencement, they will do the reverse of that to symbolize your beginning and end of your Gettysburg College tenure as a student. Uh, so the building does still stand. It did take a little bit of damage during the course of battle, uh, although the damage on the outside of the building nowhere near compared to what went on inside. Uh, Within the walls of Pennsylvania Hall, there were about 900 Confederate soldiers and several Union soldiers being treated for various injuries. In my research, I found the account of a certain Confederate soldier, a Colonel Waller Tazewell Patton. He is the great uncle of General George Patton from World War II. And I found some resources regarding his injury during Pickett's charge and being treated inside of Pennsylvania Hall by one of the many nurses in attendance on inside the building.
And that was particularly intense. He had to be sort of propped up against a wall because of the nature of his injuries. Maybe say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so Colonel Patton, he was on the far left side of Pickett's charge with his regiment, and he was injured by Union artillery. The cannonball exploded and took off the lower section of his jaw. So pretty gruesome injury. And yes, as John mentioned, a nurse, a woman named Euphemia Goldsborough, who some of the soldiers would call Miss Effie, would end up using her own body to prop up Colonel Patton as he was having trouble breathing. Colonel Patton would survive the immediate wounds, but would end up later succumbing to his injuries about 3 weeks later on July 21st.
Gotcha. I mean, that's really quite an intense story, and just boggles the mind when you think about that's just one of the upwards of 50,000 casualties from the battle. It's hard to wrap your mind around all of that. Got a few other folks chiming in the comments. Barbara says hi, one of our longtime viewers. Mary Ellen says greetings from Lancaster and from a fan of your museum. Well, thank you, Mary Ellen. We appreciate that. And she goes so far as to say that Frederick is a great town, and we certainly agree. Let's see here. Jan says, I'm interested to know your thoughts when you're able to see or touch archival materials, primary source documents, etc. I'm not sure exactly what you're getting at, but Michael, I know that you did consult a number of the some of the published primary sources that we have here. Of course, we have a good bunch of stuff in the collections room that I'm sure at some point you'll get the chance to get at. But maybe share with some of the viewers. You've obviously done a lot of research for us. Maybe share with the viewers some of your favorite resources that you've consulted on a regular basis just in your short time here.
Yeah, sure. A lot of the research that I have done has been from published personal accounts. One that I try to refer to as much as I can is the sorry, I'm just having trouble seeing it. Here we go. Is this book right here? It's called "With the Third Wisconsin Badgers," and it is the living experience of the Civil War through the journals of Van R. Willard. So there's a lot of great stuff in here. He is a fantastic writer, and it really details some of his experiences. And there's even sections in the book where he is in Frederick. He is experiencing some of the Civil War hospital sites after the Battle of Antietam, recounting some of the things that he is witnessing firsthand. Another great published set of recountings of the Civil War is the Journal of a Civil War Surgeon. J. Franklin Dyer has some real good anecdotes about his service as a surgeon during the Civil War. And then probably one of my favorite of the surgeons' journals that we have here in the museum that I refer to in just about every single one of my my blog posts that I've written so far is A Surgeon's Civil War. This is the writings of Dr. Daniel M. Holt of the 121st New York Regiment. A lot of great stuff in there that I've been using in much of my work so far. And then some of the secondary sources that I refer to a lot are these two books. They kind of go hand in hand. They're written by two different people, but it is Doctors in Blue and Doctors in Gray by George Worthington Adams and H. Cunningham. These books kind of detail the medical aspects of both the Union and Confederate armies, and are great sources to get some good background to establish kind of like a foundation to then go into some of the surgeons' diaries and journals that we have to do more research.
Splendid. Yeah, those are all fantastic. I know the Third Wisconsin one is a favorite of my colleague Jake's. And I think that might be his copy of the book there. And I love the Daniel Holt source. That's a great one. Unfortunately, I think that those two, we don't sell them in the gift shop just because I think they're hard to get a hold of. But the other one you mentioned, the J. Franklin Dyer journal, that is for sale in our gift shop. So you can pick that up there. That's another really, really excellent source to consult. We got a great question in the comments from a David Mahr, which I'm guessing might be one of your relatives.
Yep.
And they ask, and this is a great question, and it's something that we trumpet a lot, and something that you're in some ways uniquely qualified to answer because you are a trained EMT. And he asks, how does battlefield emergency medical care compare to emergency responses today? So Civil War battlefield medicine compared to emergency medicine today. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And John, you are right. He is my dad. So thank you for the question, Dad. And yes, I am a nationally certified EMT. So most of the battlefield emergency medicine that was performed during the Civil War was essentially a precursor to our modern version of triage. So they would take a wounded soldier from the front lines, bring him back to an area of relative safety, whether it's behind a tree, behind a group of rocks, just an area of relative safety, and address whatever wounds they could, essentially stop the bleeding. Now, their version of triage was a little bit more rudimentary than ours today. Today, we have a whole system of different colored tags and qualifications for each tag. To my knowledge, they didn't have triage tags in the Civil War.
Nope.
And their version of Stop the Bleed was a little bit different than ours. They would prioritize different injuries that they knew they can treat, rather than trying to treat the whole. A lot of the times, a part would be treated. But in terms of some of the tools and techniques that they used, I was surprised to learn this, but they had tourniquets in the Civil War. Very similar in how they work and what they look like to modern tourniquets. I don't have one on me at the moment, but the ones from the Civil War do look very similar to ones that we have today. So they would use tourniquets on the extremities, either to try and stop bleeding or right before an amputation was performed in a field hospital. Gauze bandages, certain medications that stretcher bearers and field medics would carry with them, much like EMTs carry those large bags with them filled with various basic medicines and basic care tools whenever we come across a patient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your answer, really lays bare the fact that Civil War medicine, it's not modern medicine, but it has a striking number of similarities with the way that we practice emergency medicine today. It really kind of laid that groundwork, that that point of injury care, the triaging, the tourniquets, the bandages, the ambulances, the stretchers, all of that stuff is kind of recognizable to our modern sensibilities, even though it looks different. They're using wagons instead of motorized vehicles, and thankfully we know about germ theory. There's all kinds of all kinds of ways that we're just a little bit better at it than they were then. But the structure, just as you said, Michael, is remarkably similar. So that's something we talk a lot about here at the museum. Trying to connect the past to the present. This is something that I think you'll probably be able to speak to, Michael. Nancy Pound asks, or says, I'm hoping to learn about how the civilian women in Frederick actively helped in the hospital settings. So I know you've been doing our walking tour, and I'm sure you talk at least a little bit about some of the ladies aid society. So maybe you can speak to that question.
Yeah. So a lot of many times it was very common for say women's organizations to serve as nurses. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought a little bit there. All right, we're back on. Yeah, a lot of women's organizations would be formed to serve as medical providers in hospitals. I know in the Lutheran Church, which is about a block away from the museum, Sergeant Henry Tisdale, who I mentioned earlier, we also have some of his accounts in our One Best Hospital walking tour. He mentions that several of the women of Frederick did pay special care to the Confederate soldiers who were in the Lutheran Church, and didn't really pay much attention to the Union soldiers, giving them extra food, maybe an extra article of clothing or something like that, which also goes into a lot of what we talk about during or what some of the tour guides talk about during the walking tour is the political climate of Maryland in the 1860s. And it was very much divided. With a lot of the Southern sentiment, or more Southern sentiment or sympathies in the Eastern Shore and near Annapolis, with slightly more Union sympathies in the western parts of the state, including Frederick. So well, that's all I can come up with off the top of my head. And that's something that I definitely want to look more into is more of a women's organization's roles in the medical history of the Civil War.
Mm-hmm. And there was one such organization here in Frederick, the Ladies Relief Association, and a lot of what they would do in the aftermath of Antietam and really throughout the war, but especially then, is just kind of bring food and supplies, like you mentioned. But just as you were speaking to there, Mike, it depended a lot, the people that are bringing food, depends as to, where your sympathies lie. It was not uncommon for, Confederate sympathizers to only bring food for wounded Confederate soldiers and vice versa. The more organized kind of Ladies Relief Association in Frederick, I think was a little bit more egalitarian than that. And they kind of brought food to everyone. But bringing food, writing letters, conversing with the soldiers, doing a bit of nursing, changing bandages, all these sorts of things. It would be sort of the role that they played throughout the time when Frederick was so described as one vast hospital. Let me see here. We got a couple other questions coming in. Jan asked if hospital stewards had access to lint. The short answer there is yes. That was one of the kind of tools in a Civil War medical personnel's bandaging arsenal. Lint was one of those. Let's see. Yeah, so we've covered some of the other bits of research you've done, and you have a few that you're in the midst of working on, and they'll end up getting posted over the coming months. But I know, Michael, you've been working on posts about alcohol in the Civil War and about temperature-related injuries and such. Do you want to speak a bit about each of those posts?
Yeah, so the alcoholism blog post that I'm finishing up writing, hopefully I can get that a final product done very soon. Same thing with the temperature post. I'm wrapping those up. But the alcoholism post kind of started a few weeks ago. I was looking for things that would disqualify a soldier from service in the Civil War. And as I was flipping through the index of a book, a word caught my eye: drunkenness. And I decided to, go and just check it out, maybe give myself a little mental break on the current thing that I was researching. And I came across the claim that drunkenness was the most common charge against surgeons during the Civil War. And that kind of led me down a rabbit hole of writing a blog post about alcoholism. And the museum does have a book in our library. It's called Bad Doctors. That is a collection of uh, court-martial charges against surgeons. Is that correct?
Yeah, sorry, you're breaking up there a little bit, Michael. But yeah, bad doctors for sale in the museum gift shop. And just as you said, and I'll reiterate it to make sure that everyone heard that clearly, but a collection of all the court-martial trials and such brought against Union surgeons during the Civil War, since those records are just better preserved. In the sense that they exist, as many Confederate records were burned in the fires after Richmond in the war's closing days. But yes, Union surgeons, all the court-martial trials.
Yeah, so during over the course of the Civil War, there was about 12,000 Union physicians and 622 charges against or brought up against physicians. And of those 622, I believe it's 83 were charges related to drunkenness. But when I was flipping through the pages of the book, it appeared that incompetence was slightly more common. But as I was, doing some more research, I started to get more and more evidence building up to what I was going to write about alcoholism. And one thing that just about everyone thinks of when they think about alcohol in the Civil War is that one, alcohol was used as an anesthetic, which is not necessarily the case. Alcohol was used by Civil War surgeons, but they thought of it more as a stimulant than how we think of it as a depressant. They did have anesthesia during the Civil War. They used chloroform and ether, although chloroform was slightly more preferred since ether was explosive. And that would have just made the surgery a little bit more complicated if your ether exploded. Whenever someone else also brings up alcohol in the Civil War, a lot of people talk about General Ulysses S. Grant. I know there was even a Washington Post article that my alcoholism blog that came out several years ago about Grant and his lifelong struggles with alcoholism. Going through that Washington Post article, doing some of my own research about Grant's struggle with alcohol, in no means was he ever a raving alcoholic, as some might call him. He did go on his occasional binge drinks, but never if it was on campaign. He never let alcohol endanger the lives of the men under his command. And by all reports, after the Civil War, he never touched a drink again, especially during his presidency.
Yeah, Grant, commonly is associated when people think about alcohol in the Civil War. He is among the people that come to mind, and there's just very little evidence. If you really get down to the nitty gritty, there's very little evidence that Grant really had anything to drink during the Civil War. So I enjoy that you helped dissuade people of that misconception in your article there. And then finally, one of the last pieces you're working on for the museum, certainly not ever, but in your tenure here as an intern, is all about kind of the extremes of temperature and how that could have an impact on a soldier's life.
Yeah, so we've all seen Union Confederate soldiers' uniforms. Lots of wool involved, which wool, great for the winters, not great for the summers, especially when you have multiple layers of wool that gets to be very heavy. And for those of you who are in the mid-Atlantic, summers are getting quite humid here. Uh, and let's just say I'm thankful to be wearing cotton right now. Uh, so yeah, wool is not very suited for the summer climates in, well, just about any region of the world. Wool is more suited for the winter months. Uh, but wool was a little bit harder to come by the Confederates. Well, uniforms in general were a little slightly harder to come by for Confederate forces as they were less industrialized. Uh, Now they did usually have, for the most part, shoes and overcoats were big in. Uh, Sorry, I'm having trouble finding the word there. Uh, were usually out of supply. Uh, or if they were in supply, most of the time they might go to, say, a fresh regiment of troops, or a troop who is dangerously in need of them. Uh, and so frostbite, hypothermia, heat stroke, which normally they would call sunstroke during the Civil War, those were all incredibly common. Uh, and one thing that I did find surprising in my research was about 200 and I believe 59 Union soldiers died of heat stroke. That's about a 4% mortality rate for an affliction that is 100% treatable and very avoidable. Which, while the number might seem low when you think about the total number of soldiers in the Union Army, it's quite high when you consider that heat stroke and sunstroke could have been easily avoided.
And that's a great example of how Civil War medicine, as kind of recognizably kind of modern-esque that sometimes it seems, it's definitely not modern medicine. I mean, just as you say, even though that seems like it's a low number in the context of, the 1 million plus who served, the fact that it's more than a handful is pretty damning. Of that there just shouldn't really have been hardly any cases of fatality from sunstroke. Well, as we kind of come to the end of our time here, and you come to the end of at least this your first phase of working at the museum, we'll be glad to have you back working the front desk occasionally on weekends during the semester. As you're coming to the close of this, your first phase of work here at the museum, I'm curious if there are any lessons you have that you're going to take away from your time here so far. And then I'm curious if your time here, and there's no wrong answer, you can say it's made you less interested if you want. I'm curious if your time here has made you more or less interested in museum work, broadly speaking.
I'd say my time here has definitely made me more interested in museum work because I always thought that right after college I would try to get teaching certification, try to get right into teaching. But now that I've worked here at the museum, I've started to think of it more as another option, another pathway to pursue my love of history. Um, and it's definitely something that I've thought of more and more over the past several months. And it's just I never really thought before I even came to college. I never thought of working in a museum. I wanted to be a teacher since I was maybe 13, around eighth grade. But yeah, then working here in the museum, I've had such an amazing time. The people who work here at the museum, fantastic group of people. No matter what background you are, you're going to learn something from the people who work here, uh, and it's just made me want to at least try out working in a museum when I graduate this coming May. And kind of one of my main takeaways from these past several weeks is that there's a big difference in academic history and public history, one that I didn't really realize until I started working here. Like academic history is a little bit more, I don't want to say polished, but I also do want to say polished. Uh, More designed for uh, republication in a sense, whereas public history is more just for the public viewing. Well, that doesn't mean that public history isn't any less important than academic history. It's just adjusting to a different style of writing, and that adjustment kind of threw me off a little bit when I started here, but I feel like I've definitely gotten a little better at doing that.
Yeah, I remember making that adjustment myself. Of course, you're, currently a college student. I came here after I finished up grad school, and I remember that my first editor here, she was like, she had to tell me repeatedly that, you're not writing papers anymore, for, to be sent into your professors. You can dial the intensity there back a little bit. And I remember I had to have sort of the same conversation with you when you first started here. And again, it's not that the less academic writing makes it worse, or even less scholarly. I mean, the information is just as good and just as well researched. It's just, you're writing for a different audience. You're for something that gets published online, you have to vie for people's attention. um, you know anything people do or read on the internet, there's a bazillion other things they could be reading or doing, so you got to make it eye-catching, eye-grabbing, in ways that you don't quite as much when you're a student, because the professor has to read it because it's their job, and all that sort of thing. And if you're publishing a book, that's more of a long form prospect anyway. So there are all these differences, exactly as you were hitting upon there. So I'm glad that you picked up on that. And again, I want to reiterate, these differences are not necessarily a better or worse. They're just different. They're just that. And it's just kind of stylistically, which you prefer to do, and all that sort of thing. So thank you so much for joining us, Michael. Really appreciate you joining us, not just for the live stream, but for the summer here. It's been wonderful to get to work with you, and I'm excited to continue to work with you going forward here over the coming months. And thank you to all of you out there. Just really appreciate you tuning in today. If you like the program, consider sharing it. Hit the like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're getting close to 5,000 subscribers. That's really exciting. I'm glad to be approaching that milestone. So go ahead and follow us there if you want to stay in touch and stay up to date with all the latest work that we're doing here at the museum. And if you want to take your support to that next level, consider becoming a member of the museum for as low as $25 a year. That's just a little bit more than $2 a month. Every membership goes a long way towards helping us continue to do what we do here at the museum. So we really appreciate it if you're able to support us in that way. Well, thank you, Michael, so much for being here. It was great to have you on today.
Yeah, it was great to come on. I think my first ever live stream went pretty well.
I'd say so. We'll have to have you on for one in the future.
Yeah.
So splendid. So to everyone out there, thank you for tuning in, and we will hope to see you next time we come on. We'll see you next week, everybody. Bye.